You're watching gnbnow, your trusted source for breaking news, insightful analysis, and powerful stories from around the world. Good evening, I'm John, and welcome to gnbnow Nightly News at 9 p.m. Eastern. Tonight, we bring you breaking developments from Washington, D.C., where a federal judge has temporarily blocked President Donald Trump's controversial federal funding freeze. But that's not all. Today, President Trump signed another executive order that has already sparked heated debates nationwide. Top story: federal judge temporarily blocks Trump's federal funding freeze. A federal judge has issued an administrative stay on Trump's executive order to freeze billions of dollars in federal grants and loans. The decision halts the freeze until February 3, allowing time for legal arguments. Here's what you need to know. Key developments. 1. Judicial intervention. U.S. District Judge Lauren L. Ali Khan issued the stay late Tuesday, temporarily halting Trump's order. The freeze targeted programs like diversity, equity and inclusion initiatives, climate change efforts, and transgender rights protections, but left critical sectors like disaster relief and healthcare programs in uncertainty. The executive order was set to take effect yesterday at 5 p.m. 2. Legal challenges. Democratic-led states argue the freeze violates the Impoundment Control Act, which prohibits presidents from withholding congressionally approved funds. Advocacy groups and legal experts warn the move could harm vulnerable populations. 3. Repercussions. State officials and nonprofits fear disruptions in hurricane recovery, Medicaid reimbursements, child care funding, and more. Even some Republicans are questioning the legality of the freeze. The court will reconvene on February 3, and experts predict the case may escalate to the Supreme Court, potentially reshaping the limits of presidential authority. Trump signs executive order banning gender-affirming care for minors. In another major development today, President Donald Trump signed an executive order titled Protecting Children from Chemical and Surgical Mutilation. The order bans federal funding, promotion, and support of gender-affirming care for minors, including puberty blockers, hormone therapies, and surgeries. Speaking from the White House, Trump declared, "Today, it was my great honor to sign an executive order banning the chemical castration and medical mutilation of innocent children in the United States of America. Our nation will no longer fund, sponsor, promote, assist, or support so-called gender-affirming care, which has already ruined far too many precious lives. My order directs agencies to use every available means to cut off federal financial participation in institutions which seek to provide these barbaric medical procedures that should have never been allowed to take place." Key points of the executive order. 1. Federal funding prohibited. The executive order directs federal agencies to cut off funding to institutions providing gender-affirming medical procedures for minors. Research grants, healthcare funds, and educational support for these practices will cease. 2. The administration's stance. The Trump administration has framed the order as protecting children from what it describes as irreversible, harmful medical interventions. Trump labeled these procedures barbaric and vowed to end what he called woke gender ideology in medicine. 3. Backlash and legal challenges. Advocacy groups, medical organizations, and civil rights advocates have condemned the order, arguing it denies transgender youth access to necessary medical care. Legal battles are already being planned, with opponents calling the move unconstitutional and harmful to vulnerable communities. 4. Social and political reactions. Supporters of the order, including some conservative lawmakers and religious groups, praised it as a step towards safeguarding children. Opponents warned that it could exacerbate mental health struggles for transgender youth and lead to worse health outcomes. Wider implications. Both the blocked funding freeze and the new executive order highlight a growing divide in U.S. politics, particularly over the role of federal government in healthcare, education, and social issues. Notable quotes. President Trump, Our nation will no longer support the chemical and surgical mutilation of children. These practices should never have been allowed. Advocacy groups. This order puts vulnerable children in harm's way and denies them life-saving medical care. What's next? The fallout from today's developments is likely to dominate headlines for weeks. On February 3, the court will decide whether to extend the block on Trump's funding freeze. Meanwhile, advocacy groups are already preparing lawsuits against the new executive order, with some cases expected to escalate to the Supreme Court. The stakes are high, and the outcomes of these legal battles could have profound impacts on healthcare, civil rights, and the limits of executive power in the United States. That's all for tonight. Thanks for joining us. Stay with us as we continue to follow these rapidly developing stories. We'll see you tomorrow with more news briefing in our morning segment at 9 a.m. Eastern. Stay safe and good night.